So thanks for the introduction, Nick. My name is Ben Estrich. I work for Martinmartin Consulting Engineers out of Denver, Colorado. Today, I'm going to present on a project that I completed with Martinmartin in 2020 and 2021. And I'm going to take the ITG 1124 document, which is Statistical Techniques for Concrete Repair Projects, and look back at that project and say, could I have reduced the scope of a large non-destructive testing program that we did and a large destructive testing program? So for the first 5 minutes, I'm just going to give you an overview of the project, the problems we found, and the solution we came up with, and then I'll get into the statistics. So we got contracted by a prospective buyer for a property that was for sale in Denver. This was a facility with 2 cast-in-place post-tension parking structures, constructed in 2001, 570 parking spaces, 4 stories each, and during our due diligence walk, we observed 3 tendons projected from the edge of the post-tension parking slab. So the buyer and seller negotiate. A couple months later, we get contracted by the new owner who purchased the property, and they've gotten a large concession from the seller to do repairs to the parking structure. And so now they're engaging us to go through and say, okay, what is the structural concern with this building and how do we repair it? So in our initial visual assessment, what we saw that was most concerning is in a cast-in-place post-tension parking structure, I've got a stage 1 pour and a stage 2 pour for the structure, and I've got a construction joint between those pours, and in that joint is intermediate post-tension anchorage. And so on the underside of that joint, I've got a significant amount of evidence of leaking. I've got a lot of efflorescence that's coming through that joint. I've got a lot of staining that suggests that I've got embedded metals that are corroding. And then nearby the joint, I've got a lot of grease stains on the overhead surface. So that suggests that we've got tendon distress and it's tearing the sheathing and we've got grease leaking out. So we implemented a large non-destructive testing program for the garage. So we have 732 tendons that cross this joint, and we X-ray imaged all of them. And what we found from the non-destructive testing program is that we had 31 tendons broken. So 4% of the total number of tendons that cross that joint are visibly broken in the X-ray. And I've got one of the X-rays on the screen here. You can see 4 vertical reinforcing elements on the screen. The left one's a mild rebar. The second one from the left is a broken tendon. So on the top of that, you can see the fractured wires. And on the bottom of it, you can see some bird cage. And then the 2 elements on the right are post-tension tendons that have not yet broken. So next step after this large non-destructive testing program is to go in and repair the broken tendons and to start to sample the structure to understand what's the level of corrosion on the tendons that are not broken. And so our evaluation of the cause of this damage is not very complicated, right? The joint we know is leaking. This is late 90s design, early 2000 post-tension construction in Denver. And so we have plastic press fit encapsulation. And what we found was that this press fit encapsulation probably was never a great system, definitely didn't get installed well, and possibly got jostled and moved around during concrete placement. And so we had a lot of open joints in the encapsulation. We had a lot of torn encapsulation. When we opened up these encapsulation elements, the annular space is really big and it was not full of grease. And so just a lot of room for corrosion action. So we opened up the encapsulation at our initial testing locations, and we saw severe corrosion. We saw broken wires at the locations where we had fractured tendons from the X-ray data. We just had broken tendons. So we executed a very large program to go through repair all the broken tendons. We'd identified a significant number of the tendons as questionable, and so we opened up a significant number of those locations, and we had identified another I'm going to call it a population, even though it wasn't a statistical population at the time, that we treated as no expected damage. And so we opened up a portion of those too. And so for all the severely corroded locations and anything that was broken, we spliced in new tendons, and then we did a very large waterproofing project to install sealants, traffic coatings, and we gave the owner a repair program so that they can maintain this garage in the future. So that was the project that I did 5 years ago now. So now I take this ITG document, 1124, that Nick's committee's working on putting out a committee document now and say, could I have applied statistics to reduce the scope of the testing that we did at the project? So I just went through the guide step by step and said, if I was using this on a project, what are the things that I would have to be looking at? So the first question was population. So are there different populations on this project? I had locations where tendons cross the construction joint and there's evidence of leaking and evidence of damage, and I have locations where there's not. And really quickly, what I saw was that that didn't correlate to necessarily damage to the post-tension reinforcing system. And so we just have to be really careful with bias, right? If I identify these two populations, it doesn't mean that I don't need to test population one. I still need to go test population one. I can't just write it off and say, there's no evidence of damage, and so I don't need to test it. If I want to make statistical statements about the whole project, then I have to test both those populations. So X-ray imaging, this is where, as I went through the guide document, X-ray imaging is difficult because it's not normally distributed data. So the information that I get out of the X-ray is the tendon is broken or it's not broken. So it's binary. So it's 0 or 1. And so that's not a normally distributed data that I get out of that X-ray. I made a very large effort during review of the X-ray information to anticipate if there was going to be corrosion damage at intermediate anchorage locations. And what we found is we did not get good correlation between data points that we identified in the X-ray and what we actually found in the field. So I was measuring relative tendon width to see if I was getting a reduction in section. That would suggest that I had severe corrosion. I was looking for different shading patterns. Shading in an X-ray represents different densities of materials. And so if I had shading patterns that didn't make sense, that may suggest that I have severe corrosion. And we really didn't find a good correlation between our NDT measurements and what we found in the field in destructive testing. So as I read through the guide document, there wasn't an example that talked about how do I deal with this binary data, but there was a reference to an FHWA document that dealt with a hypergeometric distribution, which is a distribution that, if I understand it right, is throughout the data set, I've got distinct peaks, and those are my zeros and my ones. And so that information starts to suggest that if I wanted to reduce the scope of my non-destructive testing program, that I could have used that method to come up with an initial sample size. So the example in this FHWA document was really similar. It was for multi-strand tendon and grouted ducts. And it was looking for, across 1,000 samples, where am I going to find defective grout? And the answer was 0 or 1. It was defective grout or it was not defective. And so it laid out the math for that and several examples. And it allows you to make statements such as, if I'm going to assume that 5% of the samples are deficient, which actually correlated well to what I found at the end of my project, how many samples do I need to take to have good statistical confidence that I'm going to find at least one failed test? So if I'd used this resource back when I was developing the sample size for this project, that suggests that for a 95% confidence level, and I want a high confidence level if I'm going to work on post-tension reinforcing because it can become a safety concern. So for a 95% confidence level, then I need to start with 55 samples per population. So that would suggest that for 2 populations that I may have been able to reduce the sample size from 732 X-rays initially down to something like 110 X-rays. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to go do more X-rays after I sit down with my client and talk about the initial sampling. It just gives me data to have a conversation with them and initially, at least, show them that we're working with them on budget, right? And that's something that for all of us practicing engineers becomes very difficult. So I'll sit down with my owner, say these are the initial results. It's easy looking backwards at the project to say that we should extend the NDT program to the whole sample because it was so effective at finding broken tendons, and that is a safety concern. And so I think we probably would have gotten there if we were using the statistical document to study this project. But even once I've done all that X-ray imaging and I've repaired all the broken tendons, I still have 672 tendons that are remaining. So my X-rays found 31. They're in 2 and 3 tendon bundles. And so I've gone and repaired all the bundles that have broken tendons. So I've repaired 60 of the 732 tendons. So I've still got 672, and I know that there's some level of corrosion damage to the tendons that we haven't exposed yet. So now I want to use statistics to say, what sample size do I do initially for my destructive testing so that I can make a statement to the owner that says, based on statistics, this is the level of corrosion that you have in your parking structure. So I step through the guide document. The first thing I'm going to do is identify my populations. I'm going to choose the same populations that I did for my NDT program. This photo on the right shows one of the challenges with populations. So there can be lots of different reasons for different populations. So I've got two parking structures. I'm sure that they were constructed by different crews, or at least maybe the same crew at different times, same original designer, but there's a lot of things that we don't know. So those are probably different populations. Exposures, different populations, right? The roof level that's exposed to weather is different than the first level that gets all the cars that drive in and shake off all Denver's mag chloride onto the parking structure. And then I've got intermediate levels that are away from both those exposures. This photo happens to be at an intermediate level, and snow melt off one particular car is coming down the ramp and saturating the construction joint that we're concerned about while we're out there fixing it. So I need to estimate my coefficient of variation. Coefficient of variation really just helps describe the distribution of the data. So I've got an image on the screen that shows different coefficient of variation for normally distributed data, right? So first you have to confirm it's normally distributed, but this coefficient of variation assumption just describes, how concentrated or distributed this data is. And initially I'm just making an assumption. I need to come up with a target error. So I need to say, what level of error in my statement to the owner am I comfortable accepting? So if I'm going to accept, for post-tension structures, it's going to be really important to have a pretty low target error. And so we're going to initially say 10%, and then I'm going to show you some numbers if we'd said 5% for sample size. So I want to be able to take this sample size to the owner, and I want to agree on our initial testing scope. So I've got a 75% confidence level on the screen, 10% error, an assumed coefficient of variation of 40%, which is high. And so that would tell me that I need to initially take 21 samples. If I bump that up to 90% confidence level, because this is post-tension reinforcing that we're talking about, same thing, 10% error, 40% assumed coefficient of variation, now we're at 43 samples. If I say, post-tension is pretty scary, and I really want to have good numbers for my owner, 95% confidence level, 5% error, 40% assumed coefficient of variation. Now I'm looking at 246 samples. So you can see the cost goes really quick, right? Because every one of these destructive testing locations is thousands of dollars. And so we really very quickly went from 20 locations to 40 locations to 250 locations. And so for initial sample size, that's just a discussion with your client. So I come up with my sample size, my agreed initial sampling. We go out to the site, we do the sampling, we collect the data. Now I have to characterize it. So I already talked about how my NDT wasn't normally distributed. I'm assuming that my corrosion damage is going to be normally distributed. So I characterize that as normal. And now I can start to make statistical statements about the results of that testing. So I could say something like, at a 90% lower bound confidence limit, the mean is approximately 15% steel section loss, right? That's information that I can communicate to the owner. I can say something like, the probability that the actual section loss is greater than 15% is 10%. It's confusing because there's 2% in each statement. The last one would be, there's a 90% chance of discovering 30 broken tendons throughout the remainder of the structure. So now I can sit down with the owner, make these statements. We've saved him some money initially, and we decide together what are the next steps. So if I use this method, let's say I agreed with the owner for the initial sampling on 90% confidence level, 10% error. I've reduced, ultimately what I did as destructive testing was 309 locations. Now we're down to 86 for the initial sampling. So that's a big cost savings initially for the owner, and it lets me sit down with them and have this conversation. I think that there's a chance that we wouldn't have gotten up to 300 locations after that initial discussion, I think, combined with some structural analysis. So if I put together a model of the structure, and I can say for ultimate loads, the demand capacity ratio for the original structure was 60%, and the serviceability demand to capacity ratio was maybe 80%, and we measure 10% section loss, now we can have a real discussion about risk, and I can make a decision as the LDP for the repair. Am I comfortable accepting that in place, and I can say to the client, are they comfortable accepting that in place? Because when they go to sell this property in the future, right, they need to think about maintaining the value of their asset. And so this tool really gives you a toolbox to have discussions like this with an owner. So in summary, I think that at least for the initial testing program, this guide document would have been very effective for reducing the scope of our NDT program and our destructive testing program. So 732 down to 110 for the initial testing for non-destructive, and for destructive from 309 down to 86. And then you can sit down with your owner and say, all right, am I comfortable accepting the in-place damage? Are you comfortable accepting the in-place damage? And it gives you a framework for that discussion. And that's it. I answer questions.